Welcome back, everybody, to the SEL with more Valorant action coming in here this week. My name's Infernos, just joined here by my good friend Mick, and we're super excited to get this week underway. Dallas, two teams coming into this one with a winning record this week. Now that they played their games up last week, one of these teams, though, unfortunately, is going to have to go even heading into the next.
And thankfully, they already gave themselves a little bit of a cushion, all things considered. It's very early on in the season. Can't really make too many judgments just yet. But to go ahead, find yourself with that 1-0 start, that's what we're really looking for. I mean, knowing that obviously as things start to go along, knowing these best of three seasons are going to feel a lot more tedious to a certain degree, you're going to make sure that even then, if you lose a best of three, you know that you at least put in the time somewhere to compensate for it.
And we're so excited to say best of threes. We'll say it every week throughout this season split, whatever it is. We're going to rub it in as much as possible because we, the casters, love best of threes as much as you, the players, love it just on top. And it even makes seeding in our minds a little bit easier as well. And speaking of that, you'll look down below at our map selection that went forward. It was Bind and Icebox that got banned off first. Then Lotus and Split with the maps that we are guaranteed to play, followed by Sunset and Ascent banned out, leaving Breeze as the final on the chopping block, which is kind of a non-standard, I would say, map selection. I mean, honestly, all things considered, Lotus, Split, and Breeze aren't the three you'd expect to see right off the rip in the map pool, but Lotus we see a lot of recently. Split still is exceptionally good. It's one of the weaker maps for a lot of teams, and then Breeze is still very popular when it came back.
Yeah, I think honestly the biggest thing for me at least is kind of seeing that Ascent and Sunset bans going through once more. I mean, I've seen here recently, at least in my first couple of weeks here of this semester specifically, oddly enough, the teams have kind of went ahead and left the whole Ascent, Sunset kind of situation in mind instead of just kind of those default feeling maps. And they've been kind of migrating more towards the Icebox coming back, which I want to say has probably filled those shoes to a certain degree because they've missed it a butt ton. But even then, Lotus and Split obviously kind of being somewhat of relatively specialist picks to a certain degree. Where I mean, it feels like teams like it. It's special enough in its own way where it doesn't feel like the tried and true. And even then, with those three sites available, it feels like they have more flexibility. Whether or not it's kind of a double-sided affair to where both teams are going to be on attack, and they both get a lot more options, so they feel a little more kind of open-ended of what they can really bring to the table.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Ascent kind of being less and less. And I think for the SEL specifically, now that we're on that best of three format, it will be getting picked less and less. There's two other map options you're going to see. So it may feel like it gets drowned out in comparison, but it's no longer, oh, it's just one map we have to play. We got to pick a map that we are 100% confident on. And Ascent tends to be that map for most teams at the end of the day. You can kind of get a little pick of the litter, right? You can pick here and there. You can find something that maybe they aren't comfortable with. You can do some VOD reviewing. I know since it's also best of threes, it's only one game on stream, but there's other leagues that these teams tend to play for, and you can also scout out them there and get those VOD reviews in, which you should be doing nearly every week.
Yeah, and even anymore, so just kind of talking about those teams, the different leagues, and what they really bring themselves into. I mean, when you look at the bans, you're thinking Sunset, Ascent, they're getting out of the way, but even then, they're very far down the line. Keep in mind, I mean, you see Ascent being the last thing there, and honestly, it really comes down to MSU having that benefit there. Saying honestly, if UGA doesn't like Sunset too much, and we feel comfortable on Breeze, they gave us that option. So it really comes down to that kind of coin flip of knowing how the bans work, how the picks work. And I mean, just obviously the trade-off of UJ getting that initial pick in the Lotus, but knowing that Lotus is there still in the map pool early, I love seeing this map. I love seeing what it offers. It has a lot of diversity in terms of the agents' compositions, and you can already see that starting to flourish, at least in terms of these hovers to a certain degree, because you can look at I Miss and already hovering over that gecko, we can see something a little bit different. And even in the Rays is also super nice to watch here, especially after these recent buffs that came through, quote unquote, that open up these sites and kind of allow a little bit more maneuverability on the individual basis.
And you can see MSU are opting to go for that chamber strategy, which is still very popular on the map of Lotus. The single agent control that you gain out of that chamber pick off towards the A site is very strong, both on attack and on defense, especially when it just comes to that headhunter in the early rounds, the ability to rendezvous out to a little bit farther back, having a player assist you from over towards trunk if you're trying to stack up behind concrete slabs. There's so many options available for you on attack and defense there, but the same thing can be said off towards C arches or C bubble, I should say, where we saw Sandmound be dominated by a chamber just last week here in the SEL.
Yep.
I can't help but feel like that's going to come through again, but not just for one side like it happened last week, but for both now, as Minjun Kim will also lock in that chamber on the side here. of MSU, oh sorry, UGA, as I now flip it back into my head, of UGA, and we get to see a composition that's pretty much the exact same thing if it wasn't for the Viper and the Gecko that's been picked up here for UGA, which are just big enough changes in my mind, Dallas, that I think that there's going to be completely different lineups for them when it comes to utility and execution for C.
I mean, of course. I mean, having walls and not having walls is going to be a really big change of pace here, all things considered. Going for that double initiator, you're looking for a little more of aggression, kind of retake-oriented setups. And even then, when you look at the likes of MSU Maroon, you're seeing the more tried and true, kind of just sticking down to it, kind of playing slow and steady, having what will be a double sentinel wild enough. I mean, you're not relying on just that chamber. You have the leniency to kind of put a player over towards A, put a player towards C, and keep things cool, no pun intended. But, I mean, when you look at the kind of setup that you're working with there, knowing that they can deviate, knowing they're so far across from each other, and that you just have that security available to you, it really just lightens the load on the rest of the team. But it also puts that stress on them because, sure, MSU Maroon is starting on the attacking side. What can you really do with that? You got to make it worth it right here, right now, before you go on defense, because that pressure is being put on you because you don't really have as much to bring to the table.
First bits of utility up on the pistol round, and it looks like a very standard defaulting coming out here for the attack of MSU. 2-2-1 splits. Typically, you'd see the 2 off towards A, but if they still want to put most of the pressure off towards C, especially with that first blood, and now the second, it's a bit wiser to have those 2 players stacked up central and now working in for the option of B site, but more likely for that door switch if absolutely 100% necessary. They get those 2 picks, 1 off just behind Mound, like previously mentioned, and right in the gates of B, but they aren't dedicated for that push. They let Spike back behind in attacker spawn, and now they're going to the one single spot they've yet to find any information whatsoever or a kill off into the A main, off through A, where the Gecko waiting in for UGA has been biding their time and needs to step out quickly to go for a strike.
Yeah, going for a big investment here, but already going ahead and finding themselves a pretty successful hold, all things considered. Finding that wall, making sure all that armor's deteriorated, and knowing that decay takes at least somewhat of an element of surprise there to work with, and knowing the nade lines up to a certain degree to get some good damage off. But even then, it comes down to this retake that's going away. Have to have all these players on site really contribute to this because Gecko's one-shot and your Sky is as well. So there's not really much you can do here. It comes down to, well, Dizzy going out, Wingman going out, but even then, it doesn't matter. Whether it's a Radianite or whether it's an actual mortal swinging you, you're going to find the shots necessary when there's 4 people just puckered up.
Great first round for MSU. And Dallas, we saw last week a bit of a problem child when it came on the defense for this map of players over-aggressing very early. Now, it's just the pistol round. We can't say too much. But the fact we're seeing UGA Red lose players out in the open, both off towards Mound and at the arches of B, feels like maybe they're overextending their welcome in these engagements where they know it's just going to be pistol even gunfight, and they could have just sat back a little bit further using that distance advantage they are given on the defense. And it's going to get even worse as they head into the second round with worse weapons to boot as they try to get some damage out here with the chamber from Minjun Kim, with that headhunter, and unfortunately only a body shot will get through onto the Omen of Dubes of MSU, and they've got a regrowth for their Sky, meaning that damage might as well not even matter, especially when they know they're going against pistols. You may not even have to waste the extra little bit of trickle tank in that regrowth.
Even then, I'm already liking the kind of allocation of resources here from the side of MSU. Going ahead, pushing things up, using that Trailblazer relatively early, but even then, not really too concerned with the use of it, knowing that in a round like this, there's not any guns being invested. So you can spread your players across the map, maybe fight for more control around the area, and see if you can get some more ult cores. But that's not the case. Already going ahead, going towards C, securing that one. You sacrifice the A because of the early push that came through from UGA Red. When you go to that site, you understand what's already been lost. But speaking of losing, you're losing lives there from UGA, but it's to be expected. You're just trying to chalk up what you can and maybe get one to be wrong.
It was a good opportunity there for Double Smile, but they won't unfortunately be able to get much out of it. Rain is on a 2-care spree, able to swing through the back line of UGA, and a very once again successful push onto this A site. No spike will get planted for them, but the credits weren't a really big problem in the first place. A single weapon dropped is not a huge deal, especially if Rain wants to trade and just keep a headhunter, or maybe even pick up another SMG on top, but it's not necessary whatsoever. UGA will opt to go for a buy here in the next round, but considering the lack of success they had in the first and in the second, and the fact they're on the defense and can't get the extra bit of credits there for a plant either, it's a consolation prize. They don't have everything possible to buy out. Most players are down to 50, if not 0 credits, and even one of their players, Dallas, don't even have full armor to boot, meaning MSU can continue to barrel them down with just SMGs. If else, they get squared up by Goopsta, catching 2 off guard before Rain finally gets some revenge, but not enough to make for the huge loss early.
Yeah, already, I mean, we expected the early aggression coming through. We've seen it from UGA Red every single round, but I mean, finally going ahead and matching these players right there off the get-go and setting that line of scrimmage is really what they need to do. They need to understand that they had to take the fight to them. And finally, in a round where you had those weapons, they had the confidence that they had the resources to back it up and roll through. But it's not to the degree that we were expecting. I mean, in a situation like that, you typically expect maybe even 4 players versus 2 in a standoff like this. Already cutting players down, holding on a majority is the utmost priority, and Aki's able to sustain just that. Making sure 3 players, the majority of the people in this game, are still kind of holding what they need to. And honestly, if anybody can pass anything off, you're looking at your chamber saying, look, buddy, you may need to take one for the team. Go ahead, break out that headhunter, and then pass off that mantle to somebody else who's getting the frags here. But that's not going to be the case. You're hoping that that early pick can come through towards C mound, but if it's lost, that's a big hit you're taking, because then it's stranded in enemy territory and nobody's going to recover that.
If this was poker, MSU would have shown their hand a bit too early, hitting the A site now 3 rounds in a row, and UGA read that perfectly, heading into round 3 to counteract it very aggressively, with Goopsta's first initial push in with the boost packs to get those first 2, and then just set up the limelight for the rest of the team to capitalize on those MSU players that are fragmented and left behind off those 2 initial pursuers. They've got to try something different. I think C site's probably the better option for them, but they weren't finding as much success as they necessarily would have wanted. Yes, they got that first kill in the pistol round. Round 2, they had tested the limits using and trying to work against that headhunter that had body shot Dubes earlier, but they weren't actually pursuing the objective. There was no intent. And I think a lot of that comes off the fact that they are aware that UGA Red have this Viper and have the Gecko, and they want to pursue a site that's very different from it, because they have to extend with a one-man army and decide otherwise, and that's exactly what they've done. So Dynasty's in the back of site had no assistance for a good solid 10-15 seconds before the rest of the team's able to step up, and it still only gets them a single positive kill in the initial trade.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, you saw UGA with a complete advantage in that situation. I mean, going ahead, isolating, having that toxic cloud go up and just completely separate the duelists from the rest of the team. Typically, you want them to be that spearhead, but if you break off half the spear and leave only the head, well, it's not really going to go very far. That's where you're going to be short-stopped, and that's not what we really saw there. MSU would have pushed on the site, they would have found all the executables that's necessary, and even then getting enough leeway to find themselves a showstopper to just capitalize on that, clear the rest of the site, and leave one last player remaining with nothing but a sheriff in hand.
Yeah, what is he going to do, right? Well, Small's not really going to have very many options at this point in time, especially with Rain having just spot them. At best, you get for some consolation kills, but apparently something's cooking in the kitchen. It's 2 sheriff shots to the head. That's a pricey round for MSU and a rifle that is collected for UGA's Reds double smile. They can sit back, hold on to this one, and hopefully head into the next round with the same level of prowess, but it's one of those moments, Dels, where you look at it and say, okay, we've got our top fragger here with a rifle. The rest of the team now feels like they also have to buy. And when your last 2, if not 3 buys you've done have put your credits down to 0 or next to 0, it starts to feel a little bit dire when the success you've seen has been completely empty past that point.
And that's been the case for both teams to a certain degree. I mean, you look at the purchases across the board. I mean, even then, MSU, a couple other players don't have the full investment ready to go, and that's why Rain's opting here for this classic and buying another teammate, but not really going to have too much of an actual success early on in this early peak, knowing that, well, your Gecko and Rays are pushing up every single time for UGA, and trying to counteract that's going to be an absolute nightmare. So a bit of an overinvestment, even then just an investment at all, quite frankly. I think you really leave that, let the trademark just take care of them there on the flank, but in the meantime, once again, kind of pushing over towards that C area of the map, knowing you found some good success, kind of highlighting Aki as that player in that chamber, saying we can't overwhelm them. Even if we're isolated, we win that 2v2. So what if we have all 5? Well, if that doesn't work, we have a door to rotate over to B. It feels like a much more open side of the map because C and B can be pushed together, but A, you're kind of on your own island.
Hold down B all by your lonesome. You talk about islands, and B tends to be the objective that's mostly by itself in the process, but it's also where problems come up when the dark covers come out here for MSU, completely removing your Omen's chances of rotating back in. A paranoia off towards Goopsta, and I miss him. Puts an even bigger damper on the attempt for UGA Red to step into the site. Showstopper out for Goopsta. Yes, they're taken down, but not before firing it off into the distance. Rain will clap back with an ult of their own, but it still only gains 1, and they're forced to hide back in a 1v3. Spike out in no man's land, it seems. You try to step into out of the smoke to get 1 by surprise, but 2 angles being held, and diversifying angles puts UGA Red in a very good spot to take their second round win, just 1 behind MSU.
Then good adjustment there to go ahead, everybody drop down, say nobody hold that high ground. That's what the expected player always to be holding, especially when you're going for that main execute. So switching things up, keeping players alive, especially against the likes of that ultimate, even in the rain, because of that buy for another play in the last round. They're going to be the ones taking the hit economically in a round like this, where you're hoping that somebody would kind of compensate for it, maybe buy you back, but that's just not the case. You're all by yourself here. It sucks to suck, but I mean, you got to take the hits because it seems like everybody's doing that. A couple sheriffs and a bulldog against obviously UGA's onslaught of full rifles in a round like this, and a couple ultimates to back it up, especially when you look at that thresh that could go up towards main. But it really comes down to goof stuff, if that even needs to be popped, because so far, every single round, we haven't seen them die immediately. There's always been initial success coming from them.
It's UGA honestly being nothing but successful on the side that's still testing MSU's ability to go this direction. Most of the time, if you're not even getting a kill in the process and you're losing 2, 3 on the entry, you won't retest that A site. But they saw success in round 1, round 2, and even in through round 3. They were getting into the objective. They were testing the limits. They were putting UGA on the back burners. And they're still thinking that that's possible. When the Gecko and the Rays are working so darn well in tandem, they haven't found that even point. And MSU, if they keep testing the limits, they're going to keep finding themselves on the back burner of these rounds, because UG have now shown they can defend C, they can hold you back from B, and they sure as heck can keep you away from A in its totality when they have actual weapons in their hand. Something's got to change. I think we need to see a little bit more of a direct impact in through the C site, where we've seen the most recent success from MSU. And again, all of that success came off the back that they didn't push Split Dynasty when they were isolated. If UGA do so, that defense on C is just as strong as A.
I think, honestly, I mean, A just didn't even look all that strong, all things considered. It comes down to that initial push coming through from UGA Red. They always find that initial success. And the one time we saw MSU actually go for the A side was during that secondary, where they wanted to push up. They didn't do it initially, and then they waited for that push to come through and then just see it retreat. Because obviously, UGA, they had that discipline. They don't want to overextend. They understand the lines that are drawn in the sand for them. And, well, they just retreat back to spawn. That gives that space on A for free, especially if you have a couple gunfights going on towards Mound on C. That lets you know they want that control. And even then, you've already seen MSU go ahead and tie these tendencies down. That muscle memory, saying we're going C. If we hit Mound, we're probably going C. Go and C. And UJ's going to keep that in mind. You got to trick them up when they least expect it. And a round like this, you can really just hit it home.
Into the smoke, Minjun Kim trying everything. We'll manage to scrape by 1 before being downed by Patrick. They'll go ahead and use the Seekers on top. Just make sure they have a little bit more information around the bin. There is at least 1 now on the C site, off towards spawn, rotating backwards. And all of UGA Red will vacate their initial objectives defense and start relocating off towards C to assist in a possible post-plant scenario, as EXE plants and bottom side of stairs, the very back corner. UGA Red have their money cut out for them to get this retake going. They do have 2 ultimates to work with, but from the shadows here is not going to do too much. But here comes Gecko. Thrash around the bin. Information is key. And they now have so much they could know, but the flank comes through instead. Will I miss him go down? No. Somehow, some way they're holding on for now, and Rain comes up big instead. And it's just I miss him remaining, who should have died in the first place and somehow didn't. Great round for MSU to set a point on C.
I mean, even in an unfortunate round there from UGA as well, considering the use of Thrash. You try to get him on site, try to find somewhat of an effect out of it, and that just did not happen. But you know that it's an admirable trade. Knowing that Thrash has been around here for a while, you've been holding on to him for a couple rounds here, and the rest of the team has accumulated every other ultimate in the meantime. So you understand that it's at least worth a shot. Just throw it out there, because you get 2 uses of it, quite frankly. So at least pressing the X button for the first time, you at least know something could be available to you. But already a timeout coming through from MSU Maroon. Kind of surprising, considering they're the ones that went for this, knowing that they hold the lead currently, knowing that they just kind of want to double things down to look for more an analytical look of what has been working thus far, what hasn't. And honestly, the way they've set up their beginning of the rounds has been outstanding. The rounds that they kind of go towards the A site and sacrifice a lot. We've seen 2 rounds lost off of that alone. You got to take this game a little bit slower on the approach to that side of the map, especially when you look at B as well. When they take the door and when they kind of go for a little bit of a lap around, the bait towards C always seems to be too chummy, quite frankly. It always seems a little too tantalizing to everybody on the side of UGA, where they want to go for those rotates, even though the fight hasn't really moved towards site.
MSU are coming off a win against Oklahoma Academy. They're just a solid enough team, and that's all right, good standing. But TU Esports Also put up a fairly darn good fight against UGA Red last week as well. And UGA Red, now being the secondary team for Georgia, still sits in a really good spot for their roster, and maybe not as good as UGA Red, UGA Black, who took down Niner Esports Dallas last week, actually. And the same stat line we see come out here for UGA Red against TU, the 2-1 split, same as MSU did against Oklahoma Academy. And now we're seeing a true testament to maybe an even stat line for these skills for the maroon squad of MSU and the red squad of UGA, which to my colorblind eyes is the same darn color, but we'll have to figure it out at the end of the day. MSU swinging very swiftly into the B site, no hesitation whatsoever, despite the near disengagement and disinterest from their chamber off towards A, slow and steady. It's UGA now forced to come back, and how do you miss that
No way.
Giving Aki a 1v1, and Goopsta even gets a showstopper frag to finish things off. A second to join it. UGA Red, they may just be able to stick this defuse because there's no way Rain and Patrick can get through door. MSU, as fast as they can plant, will lose it just as quickly.
Not losing very many bodies in the meantime as well. I mean, holding things down and knowing that they can just kind of go for those swings there towards the end. We saw UGA come up with an actual miraculous hold, all things considered. When you saw the push through that was going there, you saw that Minjin was just walking by. Aki was just walking by to get back onto the B side, and you could have seen that slip through the crack, just absolutely decimate their rear end, and you just didn't see that occur. Instead, a single 1v1 was won, and expecting that we knew it was a 2v1, and quite frankly, UGA didn't. That just ended up being everything they needed, knowing they cleared the entire back of the map at that point. The only left players were over towards that secret door, and there's not much you can do from that spot besides, as we saw, just spray through. But with the Viper, that's where that value comes out. Just lock players out, make sure they can't really play the game, and you're just funneling these guys into a death trap.
Speaking of death traps, it only gets worse if you continue to pound the rock in towards the B site with little to no preparation for a post plant. You have two players off holding straggler angles off towards A and C. Mountain pressure tried to broil up for the defense to rotate in for a flank. Dubes had that coverage, and you're even successful with your chamber off towards A. This is a better start for MSU. And notice, they don't put all their eggs in one basket right off the rip. They step back into the basket. All five now onto the B site, where there's advantage in numbers. And the slightest change in positioning your angle can net you a very impactful kill to swing things back in your way, as MSU will take this round to go up 5-4 and finally finish off Aki's reign. Finishes the punishment they were dealing out towards A back into C. Much better round for the B site, and we're seeing better glimpses for them on these objectives, just really inconsistently, Dallas. So it seems like all their post-plant strategies change.
And yeah, it's kind of one of the big things here I want to say for MSU, that, I mean, changing is good for them to a certain degree, but it never... The trade-off for that is, sure, it feels fresh every single time. It's a little bit different, but it never seems like it's actually practiced. It never seems like it's executed and really just ironed in. And I think that's something they got to really figure out here, is that their post plays, they're not terrible by any means, but it really comes down to the site. Their B is either super clean, or we get those really ugly situations like we saw 2 rounds ago. But in that kind of point where you saw the last round, it was just done. It was over. It was played out, and you saw that it almost felt like they practiced this thing 10 times over coming into that exact round. Knowing they found themselves a lead off that, they have a little bit of leniency here to kind of push for something different, but still that CB split, you don't want to push A, and you really can't play them. So this entire game has really come down to a two-side map.
And it's effective right now for MSU on the attack. There are obviously weaknesses that we've seen, and I think right now for UGA, the strengths we're seeing is that Gecko difference in utility, and the Viper as well, for that slowdown, that burn, the sort of gatekeeper of utility that it is on that seaside. The Gecko over that mound wall has been so darn effective for utility burn and slowing down the rush for MSU that it's now forced them elsewhere. That was off towards the B site, where great recovery from UGA Red, despite the obvious weaknesses they had through that archway, still net them 3 kills there alone. But they have found 0 success on the actual C arch, which should have been the easiest part of all for them. And the responsibilities have to be fixed, as W Smile forced to run away, could not shroud and step in time, felt the pressure, and there really is a hard time pressed to get these headshots. Double S Smile, down goes Dubes. Split Dynasty all by their lonesome. 10 seconds of red time now ticking. As the flank comes forward, WL Smile caught off guard. It will have to be a rush in for Aki, as the plant will go down. Where will Split work in from? The Roomba of death spots them, and that information was just enough for the Rays to tear down Aki. 6-4, an even half for MSU guaranteed.
Keeping it rolling here from MSU. I mean, outstanding efforts from them to really rebound off the back of that round and what happened there from the initial get-go. You saw too many players overextend towards that C site, and I got to say I'm surprised at how slow it really took them to cut to the chase there and say, look, we got these kills, now we follow up, because these early rounds are looking pretty dirty from both sides. It looks like they want to take these fights to each other, and it's a lose-lose situation, quite frankly, because then you see players retreating, just kind of going back, either getting their sky heals or understand that there needs to be a rotation that needs to be made, or I need to wait for my team for that retake to go underway. And MSU, they come out on the better end of it more times than not. UGA's had some clutch scenarios, but right there is a clutch that really matters the most, obviously, guaranteeing yourself that even half, and now going into a round like this with the two ultimates, the tour de force, the lockdown on this attacking side. This is where KJ excels, and also this A site, anchoring down. That's where Chamber excels.
See how we've seen such a difference for UGA Red initially having the Gecko and the Rays Dallas off towards A? It's now towards C. And the utility dumping, I think, is a lot more effective for the Gecko individually off towards C. Like I mentioned, over that wall, off towards Mound, slows down MSU's push. But notice the now total lack of success they've had inside of A main, off towards Trunk, behind stacks. They send their chamber in a bit too aggressively, a lot like we saw last weekend. They're paying the price, and I get it's an eco round. You're poking for information. You're trying to be a little bit more thrifty and a little bit more idyllic about these swings. But it doesn't mean that you can forfeit that life. You need to have that rendezvous ready, and you need to be there for the last few moments with your team to at least have an even count and go for refrags to make it costly for MSU. But there's no hint of that. Not a scene here that's favoring UGA Red, as the plant is down on A, and 3 kills have gone in favor of MSU.
Yeah, we make it another one on the board. 3 alone for raining around like that and making it a flawless across the board. I mean, it's a good chance for them. I mean, knowing that every round after this is really just a cherry on top. Or even we could call it strawberries, because I mean, there's a possibility there's going to be a couple more. So knowing that this will be the last round, you're looking at these investments, you're looking at the resources allocated for you. And MSU Maroon, as you mentioned with that Gecko, MSU on this defense, they should be favored to a certain degree, having that KJ available. Problem is, she's so darn good when you combine her with that Viper. But that Viper isn't present here today. Instead, it's just the Omen, it's just the smokes. There's no vulnerabilities to capitalize off of those nano swarm grenades. So instead, you're just hoping that you leave enough to scare players off. Right here, right now, UJ, the way they are doing it is Gecko's a lot more versatile, as you mentioned. That Dizzy's playing as a trademark to a certain degree, slowing these players down. Sure, not physically, but when your face is covered in Dizzy, you don't want to really push off that. So with Axe, it's the same exact thing, but still feels a lot more versatile here for the retake. Which is surprising to see that UGA Red, because that guy can't be everywhere, they're not really able to really nail that in and let it excel in every situation. But in a round like this could be your last chance. And quite frankly, for this half is, because you also have a buy behind it.
Wow, what a shot by Amissim. Unfortunately, the great paranoia usage by Dubes will cut down any attempt to survive after the fact. Goops, no, we did see that. We did, in fact, see that happen. And now your teammates behind you are losing their life because you have no top ground control to work from. And the defensive UGA will now be struggling as Goopsta is literally crammed between a rock hill and a hard place, aka the wall nearby. And if you weren't already dealing with a nano swarm at your feet, you had a tour de force bearing down your neck, MSU will go up double the stat line of UGA Red. And a lot of that's truly off the back of Rain. I mentioned how strong Chambers feel in this map, Dallas.
Yep.
And my God, Rain is a menace. And we thought it would have been Minjun Kim. We thought it would have been Goopsta, and I miss him going absolutely crazy at the start from UGA's great defense on A. But it has just been an MSU showdown with Chamber for Rain.
I mean, even then, I mean, it's just a way that Rain has been set up by UGA, more specifically for these situations. You look at Split Dynasty, you have that duelist pushing in, doing their job, creating that space, letting Rain say, now I have nothing but large lineups and large avenues of the map, which is where I excel, to start just firing and aiming down lanes. Because, well, quite frankly, I'm not the one supposed to be pushing for those. And if there's any other kind of other side of the coin, I'm anchoring my spawn and letting these players push into me. So already good looks for them, for the likes of NSU, to go ahead and kind of capitalize off the back of that and understand the stakes at hand in this map so far. But UGA Red understanding the stakes at hand to go ahead and get themselves back into this thing, because you are at half the rounds of MSU and 2 rounds off the back of a pistol to look outstanding.
They'll make a quick sprint in towards A. They've bided the time to do so, poking towards C. Initial pressure on B. A little bit different from what we saw coming out for MSU, who would default for that 2-2-1. More pressure towards B and C with the single one off towards A. But it may look like it ends or middle stage is about the same. Everyone in through A main. But this is where I think we see some sort of divulging off the main course for UGA Red, as it looks like they were trying to step in through B, but with the pressure from Patrick and from Split Dynasty on the defense of MSU, it may actually just force their hand off towards the A site instead. As Spike has been left there, they're too concerned about Split Dynasty, who had that initial pressure, and now will be forced to be concerned about the Omen watching on Stairwell as well, but they were too slow on the swing. Dubes was not there in time, and the Spike will be collected and sent off towards the B site. As Goopsta gets the plant down. No, just the moment right before it goes. As MSU in an even 2-on-2 now with control over the Spike. They thought it's Hockey booking it off into Dodge, doing everything they can. There will be time for the plant, but it will be a 1v1 with Split down to nearly 15, no 20 HP. A lot to ask for against a Viper that can cut off sight lines.
Perfect little Toxic Cloud going up there to also give you that coverage to go from one side to the other. I mean, it was a mere milliseconds off, all things considered, with that pain shell going through, looking for the detonation, and forcing that player to funnel out to go off somewhere else because you're not sticking that spike, quite frankly. But with this lap around, this flank, we're playing a game of Ring Around the Rosie, and quite frankly, this is the part where the defenders are on the bad end of a trade. You see that time, you hear the defuse noises go off, and sure, you can get to half. That's the benefit of Valorant. But it's not all that beneficial when you know that it is getting this close. You have players just once again going back and forth. Still, with seconds remaining, it's going to be just by the grit of their teeth. But still, it's going to be a success coming out here from MSU Maroon once more. Talk about that clock. You got to hurry up with it. And already seeing Raze, knowing that that player ran back towards spawn, saw the Toxic Cloud, and still decided to move back towards Mound is a wild assumption, knowing that you lost literally 2 seconds off of that, and it was 0.99 that you needed.
I think the wildest thing about that is them as close of a pistol round as you will ever see in the game of Valorant, Dallas. Most pistol rounds are like 3 players remaining. They typically get onto a site in about a minute and a half. The round's over before even a 2-minute mark elapsed. Final 8 seconds when the spike goes down, and then all the way to the spike detonation for the conclusion there, 100% assuredly. As long as you can get basically, and as close as you can get, coming down to a very tumultuous 1v1 for Split Dynasty, who just couldn't get it there at the end. And that'll give UGA Red the best chances possible now to come back from it. To make matters worse, completely giving up control here for MSU on A main, a totally different strategy than what UGA brought. It makes sense now knowing that you only have those classics in hand, but you're putting so many players inside of that door opening that they're just going to rotate the other way. They saw you do this last round. They're just going to send it on to B, and they're already there now, ready for a plant. And you only have Rain nearby, and Rain can't see through smokes. I'm sorry to break it to you, but here comes the shorties from the flank. That doesn't have distance, Patrick. You got to pick up something. There's the Guardian.
I think a little bit of this. I mean, UGA Red also kind of give it a little bit of a leeway here for MSU to Maroon to get themselves a stance around like this. I mean, already you saw the shorties getting funnels going through. Quite frankly, if you had a player allocated towards Secret with the same shorty, you're getting probably 2 off the back of them. But with nothing but a bunch of free utility and a bunch of classics to get the job done, good God, it seems like it can be done. Consider the already 3v2 situation, MSU Maroon getting and scavenging these weapons together. They know a spike is down. They got a player for coverage, and they got a player for stickage. And they're just going to go for it, try to gun it down, and there it is. Thrifty on the board. 1 player remaining. Sure, you carry over a Guardian, but your dignity was what was lost in the meantime.
What a kick a team while they're down, Dallas. But your dignity was lost in the meantime. A brutal round, to say the very least, for UGA Red. I think so much that really came off of the, I called it the all the eggs in one basket a couple rounds prior, just putting everyone in one single area and hoping for some easy picks. They put everyone outside that door main, then they swing out with Patrick with that shorty, and they get the Guardian. And that Guardian just puts in this trickle effect. And that's honestly UGA's fault, Dallas. Why they're still back inside A main, why they're so distanced from their team in a post plant where that positioning doesn't matter for the defense of that spike. It just gives away a weapon where you know they can take you in a 2v1, a 3v1, or even just luckily a 1v1 for them, which was the case there for Patrick with the shorty. A tough luck for you. You fed the Guardian, you fed the ego, and MSU will use that as a trickle effect for more kills. You got to be a bit smarter, maybe a bit more distance, maybe a bit more clinical. But at the end of the day, it's a round loss. You got to take it on the chin.
I think distance is the one thing that you really have to look at. I mean, for a Guardian, obviously, you want to hold that thing down. It has the best first shot accuracy in the entire game from the hip. You got to play around that. It shoots better than a Vandal purely because it has more penetration to affect it as well. So, I mean, so you got to hold back on that thing. You got to let it shine in the actual ballistic encounters where it's supposed to be played. But regardless, even then, if you play it, you can't let it be close enough to go ahead and scavenge without another player being able to pick it up in the meantime. But still, that's not even really what we're worried about so far because it got carried over. It's here once more. It is on that defending side.
30 seconds
doesn't really mean
left.
too much considering that all the attackers, they managed to get enough money off the back of that last round. They have a purchase to some degree. They can all get their own little round going on here. MSU Maroon are the ones that really have to catch up the chops here and make sure to play this thing as they're trying to circumnavigate this entire site. And as they find one, that gives them the key to say, we can press W and probably get a couple more.
Rain has been an absolute menace. So effectively for the side of MSU, and it's not done. You thought maybe 2 was enough for them in this round. No, they'll top it off for 3 to get the big 2-0, and it could be the big 10-0 for MSU Maroon as they'll reach double digits. And now at that make it or break it, that checkpoint or chokehold scenario for them, and they're still back to double the stat line. Same thing they were at halftime. And it's harder to maintain that the longer the game goes on. For every win UGA gets, you've got to get 2. And they've now met that. The UGA are going to be back with weapons in their hands. Better than the weapons they had in round 2. It's going to have to be the case because you got thrifted against with that. I'll point out, UGA Red on that push in that round seemed very... like they didn't send everything they had there, Dallas. They sent out the Gecko util, they get the blind, they cover the area. They're having so much control over Rain in the initial stages. Rain could have been pushed right there and died instantly. They'd even set up a smoke in the back of B to separate spawn for defenders, and they still didn't extend despite 2 major pieces of utility being used. One of those you know for a fact is effective because it's just a place and forget, and the other you hear detonates. And still, they don't initially extend into B. They wait. And they have to send out a whole new smoke to top heaven. And then they're left with 2 blind spots, which Rain takes full advantage of.
The way they're playing this so far, I mean, already an absolute obliteration considering these players are having to push through a blind wall with nothing really giving them that coverage besides just a little bit of health deterioration. Knowing that the flashes are playing the advantage here for UGA Red, able to actually break through, MSU Maroon still got the job done. They were able to do it knowing that Raina was, or not Raina, but Raze, excuse me, was there, and you're expecting your Raze to do their job, get a couple kills, especially your Chamber as well, to hold down and anchor that area of the map, and while delaying, sure, whether it takes blood or whether it just takes time, no matter what, to just kind of get that effect there into play. So UGA Red made a nice little kind of adjustment to that in the meantime, but there's not too much you can really adjust when you get that spike down. You don't have the time to kind of go for a separation play and maybe go for a pin. You're looking to just funnel things through. You got this Viper on the field, and you're just saying, we got snake bites, we got guns, and that's all we can really work with, but we don't have the manpower.
Here comes the flank. What a hit from Doobs. Just a blind fire on Aki, a double swing, and yes, Patrick may go down, but you got 2 more players very quickly nearby. EXE on the flank, and Doobs there just waiting for another successful round coming out here for MSU. This first map, Dallas, looks like a dominating performance coming out for MSU, and UGA are struggling on the attack. And that's a shocking thing to see, considering how effective they were with that utility on the defense in that first stage. There's no sign of that success here for the second, and I genuinely think this timeout could have come 2, even 3 rounds prior to have somebody on the team say, hey, Gecko, we need a little bit more util, and if you do it, we need to be able to send it afterwards. Communication between util. If the paranoia is out, we need that very statically in positions that we know. Let's wait for that live ping first. Let's try to get that intel right off the rip. And if you're a chamber, you can't extend too early because you're getting out-chambered right now. It's a big chamber diff, and a lot like it was 2 years ago, Dallas, it's still just as effective to say chamber diff can win you games, especially on maps like this.
It seems like a matter of predictions and expectations. I mean, consider that MSU Maroon, they're holding things, they're anchoring sites. I mean, on defense, you're not expecting a Gecko and a Raze to push you A main right off the get go every single round. I think that's a game plan that you're actually legitimately following on a round to round basis. Every single time you're saying, surely that was a one off. But when they're on the attack, you know that initiating utility is going to be nothing but a dizzy. I mean, that's really what you got to go by. You have a paranoia that's not really being kind of sequenced with it, not really simultaneously being thrown out. But still, you know that there's no real flashes. It's just going to be a dizzy. So long as we find cover or just shoot it as it's coming up, there's nothing else really going on there because while Goops has been an outstanding player, we haven't really used those satchels to the fullest degree is what I'm really looking at here. We're not using that speed. Sure, we're using the utility, but we're kind of playing like a Reyna with explosions rather than a Raze with speed that really fuels her in these games.
Dubes will strike first in this round. Does lose their teammate Patrick immediately afterwards, but it's not too big of a deal when you've got that Gecko utility you can send out.
Every time.
3 players can spray it though. What are you expecting to see there, UGA? The utility won't mean for much if you can't swing everyone. And you know you're in a thrifty round. You know you're on the back burner for weapons. Take as many as you can in a gunfight. They try it outside of C-Long. And it doesn't give them anything because nobody's connecting the shots they need.
Spike down,
EXE, down goes Goopsta. 1 more remaining, 1 last person to deal with to put yourself at match point here for the first game of the day. And who else but Rain to take down their doppelganger?
See, the way that Gecko works is you treat him as a 6-man on the field.
Point.
I mean, you just kind of have to play your game. You're taking a sacrifice of utility, but you're saying, Wingman can go plant spike. We can go get set up for post plant a little bit faster. Or we can push into spawn or go literally anywhere else in the map and just let him go on his own little Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild adventure. Meanwhile, we just need to do what we got to do because we know that that lack of utility, we can still compensate for it. We can still find those gunfights. But when you're relying on it, as your sole initiator, let's put him on the scales real quick. A Sky against a Gecko. Sky's winning that fight 9 times out of 10, quite frankly, because that guiding light, just like we saw Dizzy get gunned down, you can't do that to a guiding light. You can do it to a Trailblazer, sure, but that's because it's much more powerful and provides a lot much more information and still has that damage and stunning effect to it. We don't really see that capability with Gecko. The way you can trade it off is when you get a Thrash. You gotta wait a really long time for that though. And this round where you can kind of make up for it, but you gotta be ready for the players that are pushing up on you.
1 enemy remaining.
Split Dynasty gets away with 2 there. Despite being spotted by the very first UGA player around that corner, still gets 2 out of that cubby. And it leaves just again, Min Chun Kim. What can they do in a 1v4? The answer's not much, especially when Spike's out in the open and they're setting up one-ways with the dark covers that completely cut off your chances for grabbing this. You called it a Breath of the Wild adventure. It looks more like a Tears of the Kingdom adventure where you spend the first hour and a half trying to build some crazy contraption, set up some crazy strategy just to completely have it fail and give up and walk the whole way there. UGA Red start off with a lot on the books. They had so much brewing up for them, but once that second half hit, I saw none of it on their attack. And that's something that is maybe the difference of a map. Maybe they just aren't comfortable with that. They weren't expecting it to get picked, which at this stage in collegiate Valorant, you have to expect it to get picked. I can't remember who picked what map. I probably should actually, check that before I open mouth too much.
It was UGA's map. Remember, because MSU got the final ban. This was UGA's map.
Okay, then I genuinely have no clue.
It showed on defense. It showed on defense too. Right off the get-go. I mean, there was warrant there. There was, okay, I understand why they chose this. Kind of started pretty strong there and knew their way around the map. The retakes looked pretty darn solid, all things considered. And even though with all the resources and kind of the economy and the rounds going in the direction of MSU, it looked like UGA always had a fighting chance. But once things kind of flipped onto its head, and you saw UGA go on the attacking side. Again, I think it's the fact that you have that double controller, but we're not really seeing these gears turning behind that. It's not moving fast enough. Maybe something like a Harbor in those situations where it feels a little more fluid, a little more fast, a little more aggressive. You're saying, okay, this can be warranted, but keep in mind, I mean, what this is mostly reminiscent to me of is the Pacific region. And obviously the one team you can look to innovate the game is Paper Rex. They're the ones that brought Gecko into Lotus right off the get-go. And that's how they played him. You got to treat that wingman to where it's saying he's being popped every single round. You're giving Gecko that spike, and we don't even have to worry about the objective. we just set up, we just push, we just play the game, we mow everybody down, and then we have another extra guy we can just throw off into the wind, let him get some kills maybe on that B site, let him push all the way through spawn and find some leeway towards A. They were just saying, Gecko's another initiator just like Sky, when that's not the case at all.
Yeah, you essentially need to play Gecko as just assistance for building the ladder that elevates your team. And it felt like in this scenario, they were trying to do every other rung and kind of split responsibilities for that role. But they did it in the most awkward way imaginable, where instead of doing a whole rung and having the ladder climb, it was a half a rung and then half a rung. They weren't splitting the responsibilities evenly. If they were on the same level, you could have just, reached a little farther to grab the next rung on that ladder, and it probably would have been fine. You would have to work a little harder, but it's not that big a deal. But they didn't. They still felt that rung was there, and they were missing every other reach and every other foothold, and they were falling because of that. And that leads to a map 1 loss, and that leads to your map pick loss, which is probably the more debilitating factor now heading into our second one. But before that, Dallas, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here with more SEL. Welcome back to the SEL. Map 2 is ready and raring to go after a dominating performance from one side, aka MSU, over the other of UGA Red on UGA Red's map pick. How will the second one pan out if the first was to go for it? This may be a 2-0 series. UGA Red, we got to believe in you to get our third.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, it really comes down to size of the map, quite frankly. I mean, I still want to give props to UGA Red for what they did on the defensive side of Lotus, but knowing that was their map pick, we were expecting it from both sides of the field, quite frankly. So moving here into split, knowing things are going to be a little bit different, knowing things are either going to speed up or slow down marginally, it really comes down to the pace of the game. Knowing that Raze is still going to be that required duelist in a map like this, or more times than not, she is the one that's going to be opted for. And knowing the initiator picks may be a little bit more different, there's not as much of a flex for that double controller, I'd say. And even then, the double sentinel sure as heck isn't going to be the play here. So we know we're going to see something different for both sides in regards to composition. I'm hoping it just seems a little more aggressive from both of them to understand the blood at stake.
And Split's way too darn difficult for single-sided maps typically, right? You have one side that dominates over the other, and it tends to stay that way. Even in collegiate, where there's more stratagem, right? There's a little bit more. It's not as pieced together as in the pro scene or the semi-pro scene, but it's still pieced enough that there's some coordination. And for UGA, that was struggling so much on one side of the ball than they were on the other side of the ball, right? They then dropped the ball. You can't let that happen. You've got to find the adjustments needed. And hopefully this bit of a break here was enough to digest and dissolve some of that unfortunate and uncomfortable feeling you guys were having there on the attack. Because if you can't get attack going on split when it's already difficult enough to do that half the time, and then some teams even just say, okay, split, we're taking it, 12-0. It's not even a problem for us. Yeah. You can't be the team that struggles to do that. You've got to make your claim, got to make that stake. And if I'm MSU and I'm picking a map like split as my go-to map on that when things like Ascent are still on the chopping block, Dallas, I'd be very concerned if I was UGA Red. But you got to take it on the chin, like we said. One of the teams today is exiting this one 1-1 here in the season. The other one can go 2-0, and I know UG Red do not want to give up, so they're going to stick to this as hard as they can.
I mean, MSU Maroon, considering the compositions are relatively similar to what we see on Lotus, at least in terms of the aggression. The Raze is going to be the opted avenue here. Rain switching from that chamber over to a jet makes 110% sense, and already Split Dynasty holding down that Raze, Patrick singing on the sky. I mean, to an extent, MSU Maroon is literally just playing the same map, and this is their comp that they went for initially, so to just kind of shift the environment to something that they opted for and chose over the likes of Breeze. Even then, we don't know if Breeze maybe would have been the first pick for MSU if they got the chance to select. So we could leave that up in the air to completely be chance, and this may be their secondary map. Meanwhile, UGA Red just didn't have the chance to opt to pick split. It's still a complete toss-up. There's a lot of variables that are still really here in play, so we can't really go ahead and hound them on too much. So the one thing we can really talk about is this double duels competition on the side for UJ Red instead. No Raze being played here. Goopson making a swap over to that Reyna. I mentioned on their attacking side that their Raze, didn't really use the blast packs to the full extent and kind of utilize that speed in a way that I would want. So the Reyna kind of makes a little more sense. But your Jet, she's now going to fill those shoes. And it's a lot easier knowing it's a singular button pressing. You're at least covering some kind of distance.
I do find it so interesting how UGA Red are picking up different agents than expected, right? How they're playing something new. It's always a pleasure to see. But when you're seeing that and not finding much behind it, it doesn't set the best taste in your mouth when you love to see things like that. And now people are going to be questioning it even further. You got to make sure that strategy is idyllic in your mind and you can play it to a T. Just got to work on those small little things. MSU, though, on the attack first, where UGA Red struggled. Now on their defense, where they felt a lot more comfortable, and we saw great glimpses of success on our first map. They'll be forced to fall back from their initial angles. One player off inside towards ropes. Another one that was up inside of heaven on B, forced to go even further as it's just your Astra on site being pressured, and there they go. With I miss him off in ropes going down as well. MSU are rushing into the firefight and finding great success, but the two players down middle alley have to meet their maker as Aimbag has two players up initially to find kills, but it still leaves them in a man disadvantage when they have to come up from heaven. The high ground isn't always there if you're getting flanked from behind, Aim.
I think that flank's going to work out well for them. Also consider knowing that even then, knowing that flank coming through a big garage still doesn't get to surmount it too much. You can find an opportunity, but with men, it's kind of sitting at half HP. Can't really do too much in a situation like that where you can't heal yourself as a Sky. That's more of a Sage's job, and even then you can't really entry as well as a Sage as a Sky would. So knowing even then, still with no guiding lights available to your name, you're just swinging on the site, looking for the kills, trying to play off the information your team was giving you. So it's still relevant to some degree, but it just doesn't really surmount to anything. So MSU with a good start here on this map as well. UGA Red not providing nearly as much aggression on this map as they did over in Lotus, but that's because, well, Split, if you do it, you're probably dead to rights 9 times out of 10. So you're just going to kind of know your place, hold back, play the angles. And if that doesn't work out well, this is where we got to maybe start looking at a different game plan. But we'll leave it up to Shops.
The first round on the board defensively, UGA Red, Dallas. Well, there's a lot they still got to work on. And this is not the round they'll be capable of doing so very effectively. Jumping for information is Goopsta off towards Garage on B. Smart for MSU to give no information. There's not been any utility in that direction either, which kind of leads Goopsta to believe that they can fall a little bit further back as that ground has now been controlled and claimed by Maroon. Spike's been left off inside of Market. They'll have to go for it eventually because they've been spotted off in mid. 3 players, the Tasmanian Tiger cleared away as well. Front back double. You can't hang here for long as Rain wants the hip fire with the Marshall. They'll try to go for some classic shots on site as well, but nothing is stopping the MSU onslaught, and the Spike will once again go down on B.
It's another one of those situations where we already on that first round, we saw the UJ Red can't really hold that B site with a singular individual just kind of playing on top of the site. And if they can't do it in a pistol round up against other pistols, what are they going to do in a round when they're up against a bunch of Spectres and a Bulldog rushing into their face? You're going to do even less, quite frankly. So for MSU to Maroon, once again, to kind of say, let's just double it down. Let's go over towards that B site. Same exact game plan, even better guns in our hands. We're going to see a much better result. And with 3 on the post plant, that last one, you're expecting maybe an even 5 and maybe just a closure with the same exact number with a lot of money to back up there. Now, being on the attack side with that spike money going into your advantage as well. So with 8 seconds remaining, setting things up, finally making a little switch here on the board. You got to go ahead and at least give UGA their creds to say, hey, they know they're probably coming over here. They want to switch things up. They want to see what this site looks like. So why not just turn it around that you're already expecting to lose?
Oh my God. How did they find I Miss Him immediately off the rip? That's a rifle that's been dropped freely there for Rain if they can get there successfully. The body shot with assistance from EXE in your sky. Guarantee a second pick for MSU. When you know that you're at the limited weapons, limited range in your weapons on the attack, Dallas, one of the best strategies of all time is just book it down main. And that's what they do. All 5 in through A. Send it up through ramp. If they can control tower, you control the backside of site as well. And there's only 1 man now remaining for UGA Red on this objective. And Split Dynasty's just going to ignore them. You just go the opposite direction. But Goopsta lining up too. And Minjun Kim being unspotted in their position may give UGA Red this 3rd round when they maybe didn't deserve it right off the rip, but Doobs is still alive, still standing all the way back inside A main and getting great damage off towards Goopsta. And they're getting those smokes down. 1 more in. Doobs, can they line up both? It's not gonna happen for them. And UGA Red will somehow get through round 3.
I mean, you really only have Goopsta to thank for that, quite frankly. That having control was a little bit too strong, and I mean, that swing never even happens on the A side if there's a player watching it, but still, too many eyes allocated towards that left side of the map. Not really going to surmount too much in that situation, but you still lose so many bodies just to get to this point and finding yourself around on the board. So, sure, UGA got there, but it was a very, very big cost. You have the Empress to play with now, but still can't get aggressive with it to that degree that you really want to. You can't capitalize off the rest of your team kind of being there to back you up because they just don't have the rifling behind them. And with MSU Maroon bringing that same aggression, but having everything available to them, and another ultimate in their own right with their own showstopper, you know that this round MSU, I'm surprised they're playing as slow as they are because these curveballs are really going to hurt.
What a great connection from W. They try to get something. Get refracted very quickly back by Rain. EXE, that was pixel perfect timing.
He was in his TP.
Oh my goodness. You could see the whole animation for them dissipating on your screen, and you still get the kill. The body is not there anymore, actually, Dallas. It's back at their rendezvous location. Look at the mini-map on the top left. It's down inside
Every time
ropes.
that happens, you're just slamming your desk real quick. I've experienced it one too many.
But it doesn't matter. MSU aren't getting much more past that point. A sheriff shot is all it takes for I Miss Him to get up for another kill to even the odds in a 3v3. And that means a Vandal can be collected. Down inside mid, you have more options to maybe move that over to a teammate if you meet up inside heaven. Because this B side, they're going to get. And you know it. And you need to start moving that Reyna off over here because you need all three for this retake.
You just got to play things slow. Already the Empress being extended early on in that round, it kind of created a delay for the rest of the team. I have to appreciate that. Just knowing that a lot of players don't even use those Empresses in the first place. A lot of teams just kind of hold on to it. But still, when you know that it's already expended, it kind of brings a breath of relief from the side of MSU Maroon and allow them to get aggressive, take some blind shots up towards heaven, and get themselves one more kill. But speaking of blind, Miss Him is blind trying to get onto site. You have the two duelists still here. If there's anybody who can take the site back, it's got to be both of them. Working back to back, knowing the sticking is going off. With two players there, the thing going off, and you don't swing it, you're thankful to have the manpower to trade it.
When you can win rounds and you can get into rounds and even lose players and know that you have control and have the patience to stay so slow and steady into a site, that's what can just divide you from a very poor team with great performance but not great finishing to a team that can do everything all across the board. And MSU, they have good solid starts. They play very solid frags when they go up through mid, which back 2 years ago, Dallas, you remember, he who controlled mid controlled the game. It's no longer the end-all be-all, but the amount of control that MSU are able to just direct and dictate against UGA purely off of heaven on that B side that they've hit now so consistently on these attacks, there has to be a more steadfast defense from UGA. And I think a lot of that may come from a rendezvous 0.01 seconds being pressed sooner, or just a little bit more effective force up in heaven and denying them out of mail, because you got to keep them off B, and you failed once here again.
Players still lost so here on the side of the UGA Red. I mean, all things considered, they read the flank. They're calling that thing out. They know the players. Go ahead, keep an eye over there back towards Garage. And that's why you have so many players holding that back angle. That's going to be watching back towards spawn, playing off the back of those calls. Everybody else is going to be kind of keeping their eyes towards site. But with Rain having that play storm active, you have the mobility available to you. You have the guns still in hand that are pinpoint accurate while you're completely sprinting. So it makes it really easy to clean up the house and make sure to get yourself a fourth on the board. I like the idea UGA Red had there. They gave up the B side. They understand that they can't really hold it all that well because, well, this was MSU's map pick. But seeing that they're going to go from a lap through A, didn't take the spawn route, instead went right through water, and somebody was still sniffing that out because they said, MSU, we can take this with 4 players, and we can still allocate somebody to mid just to kind of keep an eye on things and let them just kind of hang back for a minute, and still managing to get one and understanding another body's there. That's an easy call to make. That is not just map control, but that's map knowledge tacked on top of it to where it just feels like the round's secured before you even put the spike down.
It's a wave, Dallas, right? I mean, that's really what it's coming down into. They're coming in droves. They know where they need to step to. The post plants are pristine. MSU feel in control, and they don't seem like they're going to relinquish that control anytime soon. You know the frame, Jesus take the wheel. They don't need to. They went through their driver's test. They know what's going on, but I don't think they know what's happening in the back line. One frame back, another for W Smile, and MSU. They just were playing so slow for this very long con play into A main, and it somehow didn't work out despite 4 players stacking B for UGA.
And then the tour de force thing popped and spawned as well off the back of that kill, saying, might as well. They're going to be swinging me. I'm going for a personal Bogdan here. I set myself up because this is looking so great. And the way that UGA, I talked at the flank in the last round. Through water was a little bit iffy, but they understood there's still one more place we can flank through. The one that nobody really expects because it takes way too long. That's going to be spawn, and that's going to be your success.
Yeah, they don't expect it, but if you're MSU, you maybe would expect it, considering it goes, oh, it takes very long. We've been standing still, doing a mime impersonation, making no noise and just creating our own entertainment here for the last minute and a half. And you had no clue that no one was watching the back. And there just seemed to be a big miscommunication. Maybe at the last second there, Dallas, 2 players were turning, who were initially watching that back line, were turning and wanting to use utility on the A side, so that's why they returned. It doesn't matter. It was a poor decision making, and it's going to be a round that doesn't go their favor, which is something that's seemingly pretty rare right now for MSU. And they also are struggling to keep that player alive off in sewers. They do get away with a kill up inside tower.
Just again, I mean, you have one singular player creating such a nuisance around the map that everybody else at UGA Red just is completely distracted by the fact and letting MSU just overwhelm the site in the meantime. I mean, literally a Cypher in water was distracting 3 players. You make that call from the minimap, say, this guy's free on A, make the run, overwhelm him, get the spike down, and make them pay. And every single time, not only are they paying, they're going into debt here. Because UGA just seem to be giving up so much for just little to nothing at all. And the investment, so long as it gets away from them, it doesn't even have to be a trade-off. It doesn't even have to be positive. Still, by the time it's engaged, it's already a losing battle.
There's got to be some difference maker here in my mind, Dallas, to give UGA some chance. And I think a lot of that comes off of that aggressiveness that they were trying to bring in this last round. You know, you have EXE isolated. They're really hard to square down off inside sewers. They have the trap wire. They've got the Cypher cage. They can kind of wait things out a little bit. You have the right idea of tossing down, you know, the vortex, the stun, whatever you have for your Asterisk kit to try and keep them there for as long as possible. But even after they used that utility, and it did connect, even in a small part there, Dallas, they didn't engage. Where's the aggression from Georgia? You're Bulldogs, baby. Come on. You got to get in the face. You're sweethearts, yes, but you also know that you can go quickly. You can sprint into the action. You can get into the playtime. In UGA Red, I just feel like they don't have that aggression. They're just playing a little bit too in the back line. And even when they do go for it, it's a sniper out of a smoke when there's more likely more than just one down through mid. It's the wrong decision at the wrong time.
To be fair, both these teams are Bulldogs. And
I know it's exactly. MSU really a Bulldog?
Yes, they are also Bulldogs.
Wow.
Come on, man. We both watch college football. You should know this.
I probably should, yeah.
Regardless, though, one thing we should also know is that UGA Red, once again, in a post plant, not having the manpower, just once again being down to the numbers. And in these kinds of situations, I mean, it really comes down to what do you have available to work with. And already we just see a tailwind waiting. We have the post plant set ready to go. They're just kind of slowing things down, slowly pushing out. They're probably going to touch this tripwire. I mean, they're not even having to swing anything. That is just holding the site for them. They've already lapped around, and they are just able to kind of play this thing out. By the time they even touch it, watch. You got Jet going over.
One enemy
the timer
remaining.
taking off. Distraction being made, and just clean rounds MSU once again.
Oh, they've already broken even. You said it, and I'll point this out because this actually bothered me in the first map, Dallas. So I'm going to go on a tangent here. This bothered me. You said everything past this point is icing on the cake. Then you said some other things, and then you said it's a cherry on top. But then you changed it and said more like strawberries because there's more than one. What did you mean by that?
Like, you can put nobody puts like like what do they call it, bushels or like a stem of cherries on top of something. But like on a cake, you know how you can put one strawberry in the center like decoration. You can also put like 12 to like scatter them around the edge.
Yeah,
make it all decorative.
That's what I thought you were meaning, but I really wasn't sure. And I've been thinking about that ever since that moment. But you're right. There's plenty more rounds now. There's even more chances for strawberries. Personally, I like to slice my strawberries on the edges of cakes or parfaits or anything like that. I've got made fun of once for slicing them the long ways instead of thin ways. I don't get that, but it is what it is. MSU strike first. Who's not really surprised? They get themselves a first blood. Patrick will join in afterwards as AIM, who was already low there, Dallas, still wanted more of the action and just gets caught off guard because of it.
I mean, it's MSU Maroon just really being in UGA's head at this point in the game. I mean, you're seeing the event of that last map that was going underway. This is MSU's map pick. I mean, UGA, even though you do have that confidence there, I mean, you just see the kind of placement around the map. And even after that last round, which is a desperate to have that operator kind of come into play and get a big effect, a big kicker, maybe swap things up. Even if that doesn't work, it's just not enough here that UGA really just got to kind of figure something out, and they can't. They're just grasping at straws right now and kind of really coming up with nothing. Over and over again, looking for these retakes, just running into obstacles. They say, let's go for heaven take. There's a smoke. Oh my God. It's like they know where we are 24/7. And when you get a flawless round like that, it kind of does look like they just know. So in situations like this, UGA Red obviously can't just completely forfeit this half. But considering that you have a little bit of a stall time and a timeout, I would say, don't really hold back on using that because there's still 3 rounds left in this half. And MSU Maroon are very likely to be hitting 10-2 continuing at this pace.
And I mean, to be fair to us, we didn't mention that split is predominantly dictated by one side over the other, and for a lot of teams that's attack, because it's so darn difficult, because how wide this map is for a defensive team to rotate effectively and to have proper positioning on a site in the first place. And for MSU, they just can cut down every competition that comes their way. They know they can go refract, and 90% of the time we've seen, it's been first bloods for them, throwing the responsibility in UGA's hands instead, and UGA hasn't been good enough to guarantee that. And even now, when they have gotten the first blood, they can't deny the refract, and MSU are able to go up above and tie things out very quickly, and now arguably put themselves in a better spot in a post-plant.
I mean, it's spots like this already. I mean, where you look at the kind of rotation that was going through. Chamber still on B site, even after that spike goes down after the fact. Waiting on that trademark, we want to put it back up towards heaven and kind of watch your rear flank just in case of somebody. And you're trying to get these lanes while somebody else is down. Still, the pits are coming through. You're relying on that Astra. They do find the picks. They're a 2v1 here. But Rain still has one-on-one fights over and over again. Having that player come to the end. And even then, while it may be seconds, I don't know.
Last player standing.
It's just like, it's so slow that it just, I mean, I'm telling you, man, you're just all over the place that you're just trying to, it comes down to execution. And when they're hesitant, it hurts them. When they feel a little too confident, it hurts them. It feels like a lose-lose situation to where there just feels like no ebb and flow for this team so far. And they are just struggling to find it. And knowing that once again, they're on an eco round, they're saying this one's going to be chalked as well. This is going to be a 9-3 minimum for us. And we have to use everything on that last round just to find something. I think you put Rain up the middle of the map. She's faster with the dismiss than Chamber is with a rendezvous. But we just don't see these trades, these aggressions, feeding these players necessary to really get these rounds done. But we've seen a 30 before. We see a kill right now. We can maybe get another one.
Double. Able to come up. Rain is using a Blade Storm in hopes that they can, avoid having to buy something up in the final few moments, but it's not like it's a huge deal of concern anyways. Every last knife is being forced to be utilized against Goopsta, who just apparently can bite every single blade sent their way. But MSU will get into sight. They will get this plant down. And the eco that's coming forward from UGA, there's not too much they can do. But we've seen miracles happen before, and UGA are in desperate need and probably in about time to get their own here. So they'll rotate in to work through alley instead. I think they'll go down, but they may just try to go up through heaven because they knew that Min Jun Kun was trying to come from the flank. But now that that's gone, you're just playing to die now, right? Like, there's not much more you can do. And is it just me, Dallas? Does that Sheriff skin look like Thorn?
Last round in the half.
Like the model for it looks like Thorn from Destiny.
Oh, Destiny. See, I was thinking R6.
Okay.
I was like, no. Thorn is a whole woman and not a gun. I'm confused. It is, regardless. I think it is a beautiful skin line, by the way.
It is
gorgeous. A little
gorgeous.
Too expensive for my time, and whenever it was available, I was contemplating. I was like, do I just get the Vandal? Do I get the knives? Just get nothing because I don't play Valorant like that anymore. In 2021 champions, best there is out there. But all things considered, UGA Red, once again, we talked about the timeouts earlier, didn't really take them. MSU Maroon being the ones to opt for that instead. So kind of being a little bit, I'd say, nice in this situation. Saying, hey, you guys need the help, so we'll give it to you. Take the time, figure it out. This is a final attempt. We know you're going to be throwing every single one of your ultimates at us over the course of a round like this. And, well, we just want to be prepared to be ready to do the same exact thing. We have Seekers to start off our aggressive push towards one side of the map or the other. It really depends on what we have coming up available to us next. The Cause of Divide, not really going to do too much for you besides just kind of funneling things in, but really for what? We're not really quite sure yet because UGA's Reds retakes have not really been the most astounding things thus far. And even then, they've also been relatively hesitant whenever they do actually come into fruition. So already we need to see, I mean, I like seeing the Reina aggression, but this garage has not worked every single time. B main has not worked for them. They give up B a lot, and I really can't blame them in a situation like this. Already, once again, Rain brings a little bit of a curveball because they got money for it and go for something different. Empress being knocked down, double smiles down as well. Already, we are within 15 seconds of this round, and half the entire map is dead, and more than half the team is there with them.
You try to quickly get into sight. There's not much trying when you just do. And UGA Red are trapped up inside of heaven. Not really much you can go from. Patrick tries to work in from ropes, but it's EXE that sprays him down coming up through staircase. 10 rounds in the first half.
Switching sides.
You see it on splits. It's not the rarest thing, but it still doesn't make it good to see. It still is a bad spot for UGA to be in, because if they lose this pistol, you're expected to lose the second as well, and then it's match point, series point, MSU.
It's not rare, sure, but I mean,
you wish it was more rare.
I'd say it's kind of, yeah, it's definitely a little more rare. It's not, if we're talking Hearthstone, Fortnite rarity, all those colors, and rare's blue, obviously, as we know, it's like purple. It's not the top tier. It's not gold, orange. It's purple. It's
fair.
It's pretty out there, because otherwise 12-0 would be your legendary.
But every other map's orange, right? You know, every other map, a stat line like this is orange.
Yeah.
It's more common on this than the others, is what we'll say.
Definitely, by a little bit. And even then, I mean, just still it being here, though, is just kind of awkward. Every time I see it, still, because we don't see it split all that often, it's always weird to look at, and it just doesn't feel right, knowing that still double digits at a point like this, MSU Maroon carrying over this momentum to the next half. UGA have to really be the ones that come up to bat and really start knocking this thing out the park. And well, we got to see whether or not they got it. Already with the guiding light going through the middle of the map, revealing that information, saying people are there. Easy smoke to go through. Hold your angles. Be ready to swing, guys. Get that paint chill out. Patrick surrounding one.
Ooh.
This is that domino effect that's going to really start swirling. Give MSU Maroon one more round, and it all comes into double smile. Let's really dictate this game and say it's doable for a little bit more.
Yeah, something's swirling all right. Down the ball, around the hole. This is a rough spot for UGA to be in. Doubles making something out of nothing, though. That's 2 kills with the classic. Free gun, by the way. Against sheriffs and ghosts and everything else. Just a simple right click can knock a whole person off the board. They'll rotate far away from that engagement. And they're going to try to bait out that they were maybe working in through sewers, but I think they wisened up to the idea that maybe having any sight line of themselves off through mid would be a poor decision. So they'll rotate back out in through attacker spawn and pivot on towards B, where it looks like it'll be a 1v1 with Rain.
I mean, this is doable, obviously. I mean, both the players are isolated now. They're not working off a trade from each other, which is actually kind of insane to say, but Rain may have the timing of a lifetime here.
10 seconds left.
Oh, just barely gets it off, but still... Classic shot. Sheriff's not really nailing, but still, so long as you can get that spike down, you can create something. You're getting within right-click range of it. How double smile knocked out 2 of your teammates? But still, when you have one of your teammates now rendezvousing with you, it's an 11th on the board here for the Maroon. So 10-2, kind of that purple rarity. 11-2 is, we're not seeing colors anymore. We're probably just looking at a win or loss screen.
Yeah. Colors don't matter to me anyways, Dallas. I'm colorblind. You should know this. I never look at the colors. I had somebody unironically ask me if I could see them the other day when they were wearing purple. Like they were John Cena or something. I don't look at the colors. I look at the numbers. And right now, the numbers don't lie. 16 kills for Rain. And we talked so heavily about the difference for the chamber diffing in the first game and how it used to be the end-all be-all 2 years back, and it still can be nowadays. It's just a lot rarer. I mean, really, truly, it was really just a chamber game back then, right? It was just who it was. But it was Rain out diffing everyone, no matter if they were chamber or not in our last map. And now we're seeing it again, not as egregious of a stat line, but still in control and showing dominance. But they do acquiesce first blood. Down goes EXE and MSU. Will have their money cut out for them at a man disadvantage, but that's where UGA come into money problems. They couldn't buy up here, and they're really only working what they can scratch.
Yeah, really just trying to get by here. I mean, considering the guns in hand, you know the UGA Red, they're just dropping like flies, and with the spike still in enemy territory, sitting in those bottom sewers, you got 2 guys just creating a mosh pit of a map in a situation to kind of work through. UGA Red off the end of a round like that.
Match point.
You got to win every single round from here out, which is just insane to say, considering you have 10 rounds surmounting you and MSU Maroon, and even then better yet, you got to go back. If you win all these and you have the best attacking side of your life, cool. You still got to go back to defense. You got to win one of those. And those just seem nearly impossible, because considering that one was a thrifty, and then the other one was the 3rd round where you have guaranteed advantage in guns. I'm just not really sure what you can chop this up to.
A loss? I mean, MSU are just They're playing out of their minds.
Oh
There's not much they can do. We're looking at the same
seriously
round performance. The same last round performance we saw come out in the first map where MSU arguably could have and should have lost it, and they just run it in. They just straight up pursue UGA first and take advantage of something that shouldn't have been there that apparently is. And there's Rain!
Defenders
If you don't do it with a Spectre, might as well end it with a Sheriff. And we don't even get to see the Sheriff. The one that looks like Thorn. Which is a little upsetting. Anyone who's seen that, it looks like Thorn. Look it up right now. Compare the front of the barrel. It looks like Thorn.
The spikes in the front is about all.
That's what does it. That's what does it.
The
Maybe
colorway.
Like last word from
there's
D1.
not even a green colorway in that skin line. That's why I can't really get.
Well, again,
it.
Dallas, I don't see colors. I don't see colors.
That's
right.
fair. If
there's a color there, it's invisible to me, apparently, according to that one person a week ago.
But back on topic with the game. I understand you're trying to avoid it for the sake of UGA here. Not the best showing for them, and the map is split. I kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt right off the get-go, hoping that they would kind of show up and say, look, we still have some relevancy in this map. We know what we're doing. We're here to play. Lotus just kind of one half didn't work out too well for us. Maybe it's just kind of an attacking thing in general that doesn't work out well for them. But even then, we didn't even get to see that really kind of come to fruition at all on the second map. And knowing that the first showing we got of a full rifle round, where you typically see at least a win by a small margin at minimum, ends up being a thrifty for the side of NSU. It's insane in its own right. Knowing that they were able to just kind of, as you said, just lock it in and run it down and get themselves the win. It all started just kind of, as I mentioned earlier, I just feel like they weren't really sure. It felt like a lot of things they were trying to figure out as they went along. They were trying to kind of get things together and understand, and either took a little bit too long or it was a little too fast and orchestrated. And we're kind of in that window of yellow here, but we need to make sure to kind of tighten that thing up and make sure it's all good and green to go when we really get around to it. And I think that's what we're going to see over the course of the season develop for them. But for right now, against MSU, with two teams that are kind of on the same caliber and went 1-0 last week in the same relative degree against their respective opponents who were kind of still also in that same degree, it's starting to really show the differences here of this league.
I mentioned it at the beginning. I like seeing a team pick up new agent selections and try out different things. And, you know, it's not necessarily the newest thing on Lotus. You mentioned it. You see Paper Rex, Rocket, and Gecko. You have teams that do it, and you trickle down Stratonomics, whatever the heck you want to call it. There's a time and a place you learn it, and you start to, you know, bring that into your own strategies. But it doesn't work on every map, right? There's a reason why the status quo is the status quo most of the time. And if you're going to stray away from that status quo, I'm going to tell you right now, when Paper X opted to go for Gecko, the amount of hours and dedication they had on just that map, just that agent selection, and the blood, sweat, and tears they put into it, astronomical. You need to be willing to do the exact same thing, and it's got to show. I say it a lot. Sometimes it feels like games are won before the match even starts in map bans, and sometimes it feels like they win or lose in the agent selection. In this case, it may have been prior to all of those. It could have been in your practice where you have these agents and you just weren't ready against the competition that you faced or the composition for the agents that you faced. And, you know, if that's the case, you're good. I think that this is totally a fine result because you get a game out of this, right? Against a team that is pretty darn good. They're 1-0, now 2-0 going into next week. They have a winning record, and they're a very good team here in the SEL. I would argue they sit middle of the pack and could compete with some of the better teams, and on certain maps absolutely could knock out some of the better teams out there in the SEL. And you put up a fair fight with them on the first map of that composition. You obviously have things you got to work on. But now you're on stream, you got a VOD review, and you've got casters you can listen to and probably ignore for most of it, but at least see some of the things and be like, okay, maybe Dallas is saying something here. That other guy's probably not, but maybe Dallas is saying something here about where we are and in this direction and even on split, right? It's just something you can work on. And that's why we're happy to have the SEL broadcast to help the players in as well, and as well as the audience. But speaking of that for SEL Dallas, that is it. That's all we have here for this week. More Rocket League coming back next week on Wednesdays. So make sure you don't miss out that. And then we're back here again Thursday with Valorant action. Let us know who you want to see. We'll see you guys then.